The massive holographic display flickered to life in the center of the Galactic Council chamber, showing images that made even the bravest warriors step back in fear. Dozens of star systems, once bright and full of life, now appeared as empty darkness on the galactic map, where planets had orbited their suns for billions of years. Nothing remained but cold space and floating debris. Ambassador Li Heian sat in the human section of the circular chamber, watching the other species react to the terrible news. The tall, blue-skinned Vorthok were clicking their claws nervously against their seats. The crystal beings called Threnody were glowing with a dim, frightened light. Even the proud warrior race of the Kalani looked worried as they whispered among themselves. "The ancient enemy has awakened," announced Council Prime Veltar, his voice echoing through the chamber's translation systems. The elderly leader's 6 arms gestured at the holographic display. "The Devourers have returned after 10,000 years of sleep. They have already consumed the outer rim territories of Sectors 7 through 12. Li Heian had read the reports, but seeing the visual evidence still sent chills down his spine. The Devourers were not a living species, but massive mechanical ships that traveled in enormous swarms. They stripped entire planets of their resources, using the materials to build more ships and grow their fleet. Ancient records called them the Galaxy Eaters because they left nothing behind but empty space." A Kalani general stood up, his red skin even darker than usual. "How long do we have before they reach the core worlds?" The Council's chief military advisor, a small green creature with large eyes, consulted his datapad. "Our best calculations show 6 months, maybe less. The swarm moves faster as it grows, larger, and it has been feeding for 3 months already." Murmurs of fear rippled through the chamber. Li Hyun listened as representatives from different worlds began talking about evacuation plans. The Zilani were already abandoning their research stations. The Mordok were moving their entire population to underground bunkers on their homeworld. "We must consolidate all military forces," declared the Vorthok commander, his tentacles waving. "Dramatically, pull back our fleets to defend the most important systems. Save what we can, and let the outer territories fall." "Agreed," said a Threnody representative, her crystal body pulsing with nervous energy. "We have seen this enemy before in our historical records. There is no fighting the Devourers directly. They adapt too quickly, learn from every battle, and grow stronger with each victory." Li Hyun raised his hand politely. The chamber's attention turned to the human section, and he could see the mixture of pity and confusion in the alien faces around him. Humans had only joined the Galactic Council 15 years ago and were still considered newcomers by most species. "What about offensive strategies?" he asked in his calm, measured voice. "Has anyone considered attacking the swarm instead of just running from it?" The silence that followed was so complete that Li could hear the soft humming of the chambers. "Life support systems." Then, slowly, several delegates began to laugh. Not cruel laughter, but the kind adults might make when a child asks why they cannot just punch a hurricane to make it go away. Council Prime Veltar looked at Li with something. "That might have been kindness. Ambassador Li, we understand that your species is still learning about galactic threats, but the Devourers destroyed civilizations that had millions of years to develop their technology. The Eternals, who could bend space and time itself, fell to these machines. The God-builders who created artificial suns were consumed completely. Your species has been in space for less than 2 centuries, added the Vorthok commander. You have no weapons that could even scratch a Devourer hull. This is not about courage or determination. This is about survival." Li Hyun nodded politely and made notes on his tablet, just as he always did during council sessions. Around him, the other species continued their discussions about evacuation routes and defensive positions. The Kalani wanted to make a final stand at the fortress world of Keth Prime. The Threnody suggested retreating all the way to the galactic core, and hoping the devourers would lose interest. As the meeting continued, Lee watched the holographic displays showing the advancing swarm. The mechanical ships moved in perfect formations, like a school of metal fish swimming through space. They were beautiful in a terrifying way, and he found himself studying their patterns rather than feeling afraid. When the session finally ended, representatives from various species approached the human delegation with expressions of sympathy. They offered to help evacuate Earth's population to safer sectors, speaking in gentle tones about how sorry they were that humanity would have to abandon their homeworld. Lee Hyon thanked them all graciously, shook hands and tentacles and crystal appendages, and promised to discuss their generous offers with Earth's government. But as he walked back to his ship, he was already composing a very different message in his mind. Once aboard his vessel, he activated the secure communication channel to Earth. The message he sent was brief, but would change everything. Council, voting for full retreat. All species abandoning outer territories. Devourers following predictable advance pattern. Request immediate deployment of our most creative problem solvers. We need to get much closer to this enemy. The galaxy thinks we should run, but I think we should see what these machines look like up close. Captain Park Jin stood on the bridge of his ship, watching the most unusual traffic jam in galactic history. Thousands of alien vessels streamed past his small human fleet, all heading in the same direction, toward the safety of the galactic core. Massive Vorthok battleships that could level entire moons flew alongside tiny Zilani research pods. Kalani warrior fleets escorted civilian transports filled with refugees from the outer worlds. Every single ship was running away from the advancing devourer swarm. Every ship except the humans. The Soul's Pride had once been a simple cargo hauler, carrying supplies between Earth's colonies. Now it led a small group of converted human ships moving steadily toward the danger zone. Behind Park Jin's vessel, 15 other ships followed in loose formation. Mining barges, passenger liners, research vessels, and even a few private yachts had been hastily modified with whatever weapons and equipment Earth could spare. "Captain," called out Communications Officer Kim Nari from her station. "The Vorthok Fleet Commander is requesting we change course. He says we are flying into what he calls absolute death territory." Park Jin smiled, never taking his eyes off the view screen where distant stars were beginning to flicker strangely. "Send him our thanks for the warning, Officer Kim. Tell him. We are grateful for his concern, but we have business in that direction." Kim Nari relayed the message, then looked back at her captain with curiosity. "Sir, he is asking what kind of business could possibly be worth flying toward the devourers." "Salvage work," Park Jin replied simply. "Tell him humans have always been good at finding valuable things in places other people avoid. 3 star systems away." Dr. Choi Minho was hunched over his scanner, displays aboard the research ship, Busan Dawn. While every other species in the galaxy had spent months studying the Devourer's weapons and armor, looking for ways to build better defenses, he was examining something completely different. "Look at this movement pattern," he said to his research assistant, Yoon Sira, pointing at the holographic display floating between them. "The lead ships always approach from the same angle. Energy distribution follows identical sequences. Even their communication bursts happen at exact intervals." Yoon Sira frowned as she studied the data. The Devourer fleet looked terrifying on the display, thousands of dark ships moving like a massive school of mechanical sharks. But as she watched their movements more carefully, she began to see what Dr. Choi meant. "They are following some kind of program," she said slowly, "like computers running the same software." "Exactly." Dr. Choi's eyes lit up with excitement. "Everyone else sees perfect killing machines, but I see predictable patterns. These things are not thinking creatively. They are just following very advanced programming." Yoon Sira sat back in her chair, understanding flooding her face. "And if they are just following code, then someone smart enough can rewrite that code." Dr. Choi finished with a grin that would have worried any sane person. We just need to get close enough to study their systems. Back near the evacuation routes, Commander Jang Woo was leading a team of human engineers through the abandoned Zilani Research Station, Omega-7. The crystalline beings had left in such a hurry that they had not even attempted to destroy their sensitive equipment. Emergency lights cast strange shadows through the empty corridors as the humans moved carefully from lab to lab. Commander, called Specialist Han Yumi, from inside what had once been the station's main computer center. You need to see this. The Zilani were working on some kind of neural interface technology before they evacuated. Jang Woo squeezed through the narrow doorway, designed for the smaller Zilani bodies. The room was filled with complex crystalline structures that hummed softly with residual energy. Han Yumi was carefully examining a collection of data cores that pulsed with soft blue light. What does it do? He asked, running his scanner over the nearest crystal formation. From what I can understand of their notes, Han Yumi said, consulting her translation device, it creates connections between different computer systems, like a universal translator, but for machine languages, instead of spoken words. Jang Woo felt a spark of excitement. Dr. Choi had sent requests for anything that might help them understand Devourer computer systems. This technology could be exactly what they needed. Pack it all up, he ordered. Everything in this room goes back to our ships. Dr. Choi's team is going to love this. Meanwhile, in Earth's orbital shipyards, Admiral Kwan Tai-ho watched the strangest military preparation in human history. Instead of building new warships, his engineers were converting civilian vessels into something that barely resembled their original purpose. The passenger liner New Busan now bristled with missile tubes welded to its hull. The mining ship Iron Mountain carried experimental beam weapons where its ore processing equipment used to be. Sir, his aide Omingi approached. With a worried expression, we are receiving formal requests from the Galactic Council. They want us to reconsider this mission. The Threnody ambassador called it organized suicide by an entire species. Admiral Kwan chuckled as he watched another converted cargo ship receive its weapon modifications. Tell the Council we appreciate their concern, Officer O. But humans have an old saying. Sometimes you have to take big risks to win big prizes. He paused, studying the tactical displays showing the advancing Devourer swarm. While other species saw certain death approaching, he saw the greatest salvage opportunity in galactic history. Thousands of advanced alien ships, just waiting for someone bold enough to claim them. Besides, he added with a grin, they have been underestimating us since first contact. Time to show them why that was a mistake. The abandoned Zilani research station floated silently in space, its crystal spires dark and lifeless. Commander Jang Woo guided his team through the empty corridors, their footsteps echoing in the artificial gravity. The crystalline beings had evacuated so quickly that they left behind equipment worth more than most planets. Be careful with those neural cores, Jang Woo warned as Specialist Han Yumi carefully lifted a glowing blue crystal from its housing. Dr. Choi says this technology could be the key to everything. Han Yumi nodded, placing the delicate device into a protective container. Around them, other human engineers worked to dismantle the Zilani's most advanced computer systems. The aliens had been working on something called collective consciousness networks before the Devourer threat forced them to abandon their research. Commander, called Engineer Lee Soman from across the lab, I found their main database. The translation software is still running, and these files are incredible. The Zilani were trying to create a way for different species to share thoughts directly. Jang Woo studied the alien text scrolling across the screen. Even through the translation program, he could see that this technology was far beyond anything humans had developed. The Zilani had been working on ways to connect minds across vast distances, to share knowledge instantly between different computer systems. Download everything, he ordered. If we can modify this technology to work with Devourer systems, we might be able to do more than just talk to them. Back in Earth's orbital shipyards, the strangest military fleet in galactic history was taking shape. Admiral Quan Tai-ho walked through the converted cargo bay of the New Seoul, watching his engineers attach weapon systems to ships that had never been designed for war. The mining vessel, Golden Mountain, now carried experimental pulse cannons, where its or processors used to be. The passenger liner Bright Star had missile launchers installed along its viewing decks. Even private yachts and research vessels were being fitted with whatever weapons Earth could spare. Admiral, his aide Minji approached with a datapad. We are receiving more messages from the Galactic Council. The Vorthok Military Command says our plan is impossible. Madness. The Threnody Council of Elders wants to send ships to evacuate our population before we doom ourselves through ignorance. Quan Tai-ho smiled as he watched another civilian ship receive its military modifications. Tell them we are touched by their concern, officer. Oh, but humans have always had a different way of looking at impossible problems. He gestured toward the viewports where dozens of converted ships floated in formation. They see a suicide mission. I see the greatest salvage operation in galactic history. Thousands of advanced alien ships, just waiting for someone bold enough to claim them. Oh, Mingi looked uncertain. Sir, the other species have been fighting these devourers for thousands of years. Their best military minds say there is no way to defeat them. That is exactly the problem, Quan Tai-ho replied. They have been fighting the same way for thousands of years. Sometimes the best solution comes from someone who does not know the rules. 3 systems away. Dr. Choi Minho was working frantically in his laboratory aboard the Busan Dawn. The Zilani neural interface technology that Commander Jang Woo's team had recovered was spread across several workbenches, glowing crystals connected to human computers by hastily built adapters. The connection is holding, reported his assistant Yoon Sira, as data flowed between the alien crystals and their own systems. The Zilani interface can translate between different computer languages, just like we hoped. Dr. Choi studied the patterns flowing across his screens. For weeks, he had been analyzing devourer communication signals, trying to understand how their ships coordinated their attacks. The mechanical swarm moved with perfect precision, but that precision followed predictable patterns. They communicate using quantum burst transmissions, he explained to Yoon Sara, pointing at the wave patterns on his display. Very advanced, but it follows the same basic principles as any network, and every network can be hacked if you understand its language. Yoon Sara looked at the modified Zilani technology with new understanding. You want to use this to talk to the devourers? Better than that, Dr. Choi grinned. I want to convince them that some of their own ships are enemies. If we can inject false identification codes into their network, we can make them attack each other. The plan was dangerous and probably impossible, but it was also the kind of creative thinking that other species seemed to avoid. While the galaxy's greatest military minds planned defensive strategies, the humans were preparing to turn the Devourer's greatest strength against them. Captain Park Jin received the final mission briefing as his small fleet approached the edge of Devourer territory. His converted cargo hauler led 15 other human ships toward the most dangerous region of space in the galaxy. Remember, he announced over the fleet communication channel, we are not here to fight fair. We are here to cheat better than they can adapt. Every ship has Dr. Choi's virus packages loaded and ready. Get close, plant the code, and get out before they realize what we are doing. Lieutenant Bae Sunjin, commanding the boarding teams on the converted mining ship Ironwill, checked his equipment one final time. Instead of traditional weapons, his teams carried computer interface devices and viral code packages designed to confuse Devourer identification systems. Sir, his communications officer reported, long-range sensors show the first Devourer ships ahead. They are moving in standard formation, just like Dr. Choi predicted. Park Jin smiled as he watched the enemy fleet approach on his tactical display. The Devourers looked exactly like the ancient records described them. Massive, dark ships moving in perfect coordination. They were beautiful and terrifying, like a school of mechanical sharks swimming through space. But unlike every other species in the galaxy, Park Jin was not afraid. He saw patterns where others saw chaos, opportunities where others saw certain death. "All ships," he announced, "begin the approach. Time to show these machines what humans do best, solve problems that everyone else thinks are impossible." The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace directly into what every other species called the zone of absolute death. Captain Park Jin watched his tactical display as dozens of massive devourer ships appeared around them, dark metal giants that dwarfed his converted cargo vessels. The mechanical swarm had been feeding here for months, leaving behind the stripped remains of 3 star systems. "All ships, remember the plan." Park Jin's voice crackled across the communication channels. "We are not here to win fair fights. We are here to cheat better than they can adapt." The devourer ships began turning toward the human fleet, their weapons charging with ominous red glows. But instead of forming a battle line like every other species would do, the human ships scattered in all directions, moving in seemingly random patterns that made no military sense. Lieutenant Bae Sunjin gripped the controls of his small boarding craft as it launched from the converted mining ship Iron Will. Behind him, 12 other humans in modified spacesuits checked their equipment one final time. Instead of carrying traditional weapons, each team member had computer interface devices and data storage units filled with Dr. Choi's special virus packages. "Target acquired," Sunjin reported as his craft approached a devourer harvester ship. The machine was the size of a small city, its hull covered with mechanical arms that had been stripping materials from a nearby asteroid field. Beginning approach to docking port Alpha. The devourer ship's defensive systems began tracking his small craft, but the humans had studied their targeting patterns. Sunjin flew in erratic spirals that confused the machine's predictive algorithms, slipping between weapon bursts that should have destroyed him instantly. "Contact," he announced, as his boarding craft attached to the alien hull. The team moved quickly through the airlock, entering corridors filled with strange mechanical sounds and pulsing lights. The devourers had never been designed to fight. Boarding parties, because no species had ever been crazy enough to try boarding them. "Package delivery point located," reported Specialist Kim Dae-ho, connecting his interface device to what looked like a main data junction. "Uploading Dr. Choi's special gift now." The virus package was small, but devastating, a few lines of code that would make this devourer ship believe that other nearby devourers were actually enemy vessels. The beauty of the plan was its simplicity. Instead of trying to destroy the machines, they were just going to make them very confused about who their friends were. "Upload complete," Kim Dae-ho announced. Package delivered and spreading through their local network. As the boarding team retreated to their craft, Engineer Lim Houn watched from her converted freighter Sol Dawn as something unprecedented began to happen. The devourer harvester they had just infected started moving in strange patterns, its weapon systems turning toward other machines in the swarm. "It is working," she breathed into her communication device. "The target ship is showing aggressive behavior toward friendly units." Across the battlefield, similar operations were taking place. Human teams darted between the massive devourer ships like tiny insects, too small and fast for the machine's main weapons to target effectively. Each successful boarding mission planted more virus packages, and the infection began spreading through the swarm's communication network faster than the machines could understand what was happening. Dr. Choi Minho monitored the operation from his research ship, watching as his carefully designed code moved through the devourer fleet like a digital plague. The virus did not try to shut down their systems or damage their hardware. Instead, it simply changed their identification protocols, making each infected ship believe that its neighbors were hostile forces. "The network cascade is exceeding projections," he reported to Admiral Kwan Taiho, back on Earth. "The Devourer's own communication efficiency is working against them." The more connected they are, the faster our virus spreads. On the bridge of the Soul's Pride, Communications Officer Kim Nori was receiving frantic transmissions from the Galactic Council monitoring stations. "Captain, they are asking for casualty reports. The Council representatives cannot believe we are still alive." Park Jin grinned as he watched his tactical display show Devourer ships beginning to fire on each other. The perfect coordination that had made the swarm so terrifying was becoming its greatest weakness. "Tell them we are just getting started, Officer Kim." The virus continued spreading through the mechanical fleet, and the results became more dramatic by the hour. Devourer ships that had moved in perfect formation for thousands of years suddenly began attacking their own supply lines. Harvester vessels turned their mining equipment against nearby warships. Command ships found themselves isolated as their escort fleets identified them as enemies. Lieutenant Commander Park Min-seo, commanding the converted passenger liner New Busan, watched in amazement as a group of Devourer battleships destroyed each other in what looked like a massive mechanical civil war. "This is incredible," she reported. "They are tearing themselves apart, and we barely had to fire a shot." The human fleet continued its chaotic dance through the swarm, planting more virus packages and watching as the Devourer network descended into digital madness. What had taken the machines months to build was destroying itself in a matter of hours. "All teams, begin Phase 2, Park Jin announced. "Start salvage operations on the disabled ships. Dr. Choi wants samples of their technology, and Command wants to know how many of these vessels we can capture intact." As human crews began boarding the confused and disabled Devourer ships, the galaxy watched in stunned silence. The threat that had consumed entire civilizations was defeating itself, and somehow the primitive humans were in the middle of it all, collecting the pieces. The massive defense station at Kepler Prime had been built to be the galaxy's last hope. Representatives from 7 different species had gathered their most powerful warships in a desperate final stand against the advancing Devourer swarm. The Kalani warrior fleets floated in perfect formation alongside Vorthok battleships and 3 Nodi crystal destroyers. Everyone knew this would be where galactic civilization made its final stand. Admiral Song Kyung stood on the bridge of his flagship Incheon's Hope, watching the Allied fleet prepare for what military experts called the most important battle in galactic history. His small human support fleet had somehow appeared behind the main defensive line, carrying supplies and rescue equipment for the coming disaster. "Sir," reported his communications officer, Lieutenant Yu Jinwoo, "the Kalani fleet commander is requesting our battle positions. He wants to know where the human ships will be during the final engagement." Sung Kyuang smiled, looking at his tactical display, where friendly signals showed the locations of the human ships scattered throughout Devourer territory. "Tell him we already have our positions, Lieutenant. We have been in them for 3 days. Now, light years away, the Devourer swarm was approaching Kepler Prime in what should have been perfect formation. Thousands of dark mechanical ships moved through space like a school of metal sharks, ready to consume another star system. But something was terribly wrong with their coordination. Captain Park Jin watched from the bridge of the Soul's Pride, as Devourer battleships suddenly turned their weapons on their own escort vessels. The virus packages that his teams had planted days earlier had spread through the entire swarm network, creating chaos where there had once been perfect order. "The infection rate is at 93%, reported Dr. Choi Minho from his research station. "Nearly every ship in the swarm is now identifying other Devourer vessels as hostile targets. They are destroying themselves faster than they ever destroyed us." The mechanical fleet that had terrified the galaxy for months was tearing itself apart in an orgy of confused violence. Ships that had worked together for thousands of years were now locked in deadly combat, their own networking systems turned against them by human ingenuity. At Kepler Prime, the Allied defense fleet watched in stunned amazement as their sensors showed the approaching threat dissolving into chaos. Vorthok Admiral Kethver spoke for everyone when his voice crackled across all communication channels. What is happening to them? That was when Admiral Song Qiang opened a channel to all Allied ships. This is Admiral Song of the Human Expeditionary Fleet to all Galactic Defense Forces. The Devourer network has been compromised by viral infiltration. We recommend immediate advance to clean up remaining disabled units. The silence that followed was so complete that Song could hear the humming of his ship's life support systems. Then, slowly, confused voices began asking questions over dozens of communication channels. "Human fleet?" asked the three-node crystal ship commander. "We thought you were all destroyed days ago when you flew into the swarm." "Negative," Song replied cheerfully. "We have been quite busy turning their own weapons against them. The threat is neutralized. Beginning salvage operations now." Back on the rebuilt council chambers, Ambassador Li Haiyan stood before an emergency session filled with representatives who could barely believe the reports they were receiving. The holographic displays that had once shown the unstoppable Devourer advance now showed thousands of disabled mechanical ships floating helplessly in space. "How?" asked the Threnody delegate, her crystalline form flickering with confusion. "Our best military minds said the Devourers were undefeatable. Our most advanced weapons could not even scratch their hulls." Li Hyun gestured to the tactical displays, showing the aftermath of the human operation. Scattered across 17 star systems, Devourer ships were destroying each other or floating dead in space, their networks corrupted by the virus packages. "You saw a perfect enemy," he replied in his calm, measured voice. "We saw faulty programming. You saw inevitable destruction. We saw a problem that could be solved with the right approach." The Council Prime, still trying to understand what had happened, studied the data streaming in from the battlefield. "But how did you know this would work?" "The Devourers have defeated civilizations far more advanced than yours." "That was exactly the problem," Li said with a slight smile. "Every species that fought them tried to match their strength with superior weapons and better defenses. You all accepted that this was a military problem that required a military solution." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "Humans saw it differently. We saw a computer network with a security flaw. While you were building bigger guns, we were writing better code." Around the chamber, representatives from species that had ruled the galaxy for millennia sat in stunned silence. The primitive humans had solved in weeks what their greatest minds could not solve in thousands of years. "Your species has faster ships, stronger weapons, and more advanced technology than ours," Li continued. "But you all made the same mistake. You accepted defeat before the first battle began. You saw an impossible problem and decided it truly was impossible." The Kalani military commander, a proud warrior whose people had never retreated from any fight, spoke quietly, "And humans do not accept impossible." Li Haiyan's smile grew wider. "Admiral, humans have a saying, there is no such thing as an impossible problem, only problems that require more creative solutions. When everyone else saw certain doom approaching, we saw our chance to prove that saying was true." As rescue operations began across the outer systems and the galaxy started rebuilding, one truth became clear to every species in the Council. When the universe presented an impossible challenge, it was often the newcomers who found the most elegant solutions. The age of human underestimation was over.